A baby vanished after a crash. What the wolf did is unreal. The early morning air was cold and still in Iron Pine Forest. Snow covered the ground like a soft white blanket, and the only sound was the soft creaking of tree branches in the wind. Far from town, the forest was quiet, untouched, and almost forgotten by most people. But it wasn't empty. Hidden in its heart, eyes were always watching. Reed Harlan stood at the edge of his small cabin, sipping hot coffee from a dented tin mug. His hands were rough and scarred, and his beard had grown longer than he meant to let it. He hadn't spoken to anyone in weeks. The forest was his only companion now. Years ago, he had been a wildlife tracker, one of the best. But after something terrible happened during a wolf hunt, he left his job and shut himself away. The forest had taken something from him, and he had never forgiven it. Then on this cold, gray morning, something changed. A sharp crash echoed through the hills. It wasn't a tree falling or a gunshot. It was metal on metal, loud and violent. Reed turned quickly, his heart pounding. The sound came from the ridge road above the canyon. He grabbed his coat and binoculars and moved fast through the snow. Meanwhile, a silver SUV spun out of control on that icy road. The tires skidded across black ice, and the vehicle flipped. It rolled down the slope, smashing into trees, finally landing sideways at the forest's edge. Steam hissed from the hood. Inside, Jonas and Faye Marin were unconscious, their bodies slumped in the front seats. In the back, strapped in a car seat, a toddler whimpered, cold, scared, and alone. The baby's cheeks were red from the freezing air, and tears rolled silently down his face. Deep in the woods, Ashen, a white-furred she-wolf, lifted her head. Her ears twitched. She had heard the crash too. Her silver eyes narrowed, and she stepped through the undergrowth without sound. Ashen had been the leader of her pack for 5 seasons. Strong, quiet, and wise, she had seen many things. But since the death of her pups in a hunter's trap last year, she had kept mostly to herself, moving alone through the forest. But today, something pulled at her. The smell of smoke and blood rode on the wind. She followed it toward the edge of the trees. When she reached the wreck, she stayed hidden, her nose twitching, her paws quiet on the snow. The humans were still, but the small one in the back, he moved. He cried softly. Ashen stepped closer. She didn't know why she approached. Maybe it was the sound of the baby's cry. Maybe it was the way the child's wide eyes looked around for comfort. She sniffed the air again, then stepped up to the car. Carefully, she pushed her nose through the broken glass. The baby looked at her, blinking slowly. He didn't scream, he just stared. Ashen growled low in her throat, not from anger, but from something deeper. She nudged the car seat with her nose. It moved slightly. Then gently, she grasped the seat handle with her teeth and pulled. It slid free. The baby let out a soft sigh. Ashen didn't know this child, but something about him felt familiar, like a voice she had lost long ago. She picked up the car seat in her jaws and began walking into the forest. Back at the wreck, snow began to fall. Reed reached the crash site about 20 minutes later. He saw the broken trees and the tracks in the snow. Wolf prints, large and clear. His eyes followed the trail for a few steps, then widened. No blood, he whispered. The baby's seat was gone, but there was no blood, no drag marks, no signs of struggle. The wolf had taken the baby, alive. Reed's breath caught in his throat. Years ago, he would have called in a team, set traps, but this time, he just stood there, staring into the woods. Back in town, sirens blared as rescuers reached the wreck. Jonas and Faye were pulled from the car alive, but badly hurt. "Where's the baby?" one medic asked. The couple didn't know. They had blacked out during the crash. Fear spread like fire. Soon, the news was everywhere. Missing child in Iron Pine, possibly taken by wolves. Mayor Cora Delvin, a woman known for her calm voice and steady hands, called a town meeting. The room filled quickly. Some people shouted, others cried. A few, like Elias Ward, the head of the local hunting group, demanded action. "They've killed before," Elias said, slamming his fist on the table. "It's only a matter of time." "But we don't know that," Cora replied. "The baby might still be alive. Not if we wait." Reed watched from the back of the room, silent. Cora turned toward him. "Mr. Harlan," she said, "You know these woods better than anyone. Will you help us find the child?" Reed looked down, then nodded slowly. "I'll find the baby," he said, "but I won't raise a gun." Elias sneered. "Then don't get in our way." That night, as the town prepared for a hunting party, Reed packed light and slipped into the trees alone. Above him, snow fell harder. Far deeper in the forest, Ashen lay beside the baby in a hollow den under the roots of a wide pine. She had cleared the ground with her paws, nudged the child close, and curled her body around him to keep him warm. The other wolves approached carefully, sniffing the small human. Some growled. Ashen stood tall and silent. She gave a single low howl, and the pack backed away. The baby slept soundly, tucked in fur and safety. And so, in a forest full of shadows and storms, a strange and silent bond began to form between a wild she-wolf and a lost child, watched only by trees older than memory.
Reed Harlan moved carefully through the forest. His boots made soft prints in the snow as he followed the wolf's trail. He didn't carry a rifle, only a walking stick, a compass, and an old notebook. The tracks were easy to follow, large paw prints leading deep into iron pine, but they weren't wild or rushed. They were steady, almost careful. That puzzled him. Reed knelt and touched the snow. "She's not dragging the baby," he said softly. "She's carrying him." Each step he took brought back memories. He had hunted in this forest for years, first as a tracker, then as a protector. He had once taught rangers how to track wolves, read scat, and listen for howls in the wind, but one mission had gone wrong, very wrong. The team had cornered a den, thinking it was empty. It wasn't. That day cost lives, both human and animal. Since then, Reed had chosen silence over company, regret over conversation. But now he wasn't just tracking, he was searching, with hope, not hate. Meanwhile, Ashen, the white she-wolf, had made a home deep in a quiet part of the woods, a place untouched by human feet. There, under a thick canopy of trees and surrounded by her pack, the baby slept in a soft nest of leaves and fur. The wolves, at first unsure, had begun to accept him. The baby, who Ashen had come to think of as Leaf, did not fear them. He giggled when they sniffed him and reached out his tiny hands to touch their noses. Ashen hunted during the day and returned each night with small prey. She would gently place bits of meat near the child and nudge them toward him. Leaf didn't understand everything, but he watched and copied the wolves' behavior. He even tried howling, high-pitched and silly, but the pack listened. Some nights, Ashen curled around him while snow fell softly outside the den. Her body kept him warm. Her heartbeat calmed him. Back in the village, the air was thick with fear and anger. Elias Ward sharpened his hunting knives and cleaned his rifle. "We can't wait any longer," he told the others. "That baby's either dead or will be soon. If the wolves are near, we take them out." Mayor Cora Delvin tried to reason with him. "We don't have proof. If Reed is right, if the wolves are protecting the child." "Wolves don't protect humans," Elias snapped. "They follow their nature." But even as he spoke, his voice lacked its usual strength. Some villagers had heard Reed's words. Some had even seen a picture he had drawn. Wolf tracks leading away from the crash. No blood, no drag marks. Still, most didn't know what to believe. Reed made camp under a rock ledge that night. He lit a small fire and opened his notebook. On one page, he drew Ashen's tracks. On the next, he drew a baby's handprint in the snow beside a paw print. Something about it filled his heart with quiet hope. The next morning, Reed found something new, a circle of flattened snow where the wolves had slept. In the center was a tiny mitten. Reed picked it up gently and smiled. "He's alive," he whispered. "You're keeping him warm." Suddenly, he heard a rustle in the trees. Reed froze. Slowly, he turned his head and saw her. Ashen. She stood on a small ridge, watching him. Her fur was white as the snow, her silver eyes sharp but calm. She held her head high, her body still. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. Reed lowered his gaze, then dropped the mitten at his feet and stepped back. Ashen didn't move. She sniffed the air, then turned and disappeared into the trees. Reed let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Later that day, Elias and a small group entered the forest with flashlights and loaded rifles. They followed Reed's earlier path, but moved loudly, breaking branches and scaring birds into the air. Reed heard them before he saw them. "You're making too much noise," he said when he stepped into their path. "You'll scare the wolves off or start a fight." That's the point, Elias growled. We're not here to make friends. Reed stepped between them and the deeper forest. The baby's still alive. I've seen signs. I've seen the she-wolf. The hunters laughed bitterly. One spat into the snow. You saw her and didn't shoot? She didn't threaten me. She's acting like a mother, not a killer. Wolves don't love, Elias said coldly. They survive. Reed said nothing, but deep down he disagreed. He had seen her eyes. They were not empty. That night, Ashen and her pack lay curled in a ring around Leaf. The wolves no longer growled when he reached out or babbled nonsense sounds. A young wolf nudged a pine cone toward him, and the baby laughed. Ashen watched from nearby, her breath visible in the cold air. She remembered the cries of her lost pups and felt something new in her chest, a sense of peace, a sense of purpose. Reed spent that night closer to the wolves than ever. He watched from a ridge, hidden under snow-covered brush. He saw the pack, the baby, the warmth between them. He whispered, "You're not wild monsters. You're a family." But danger was still coming. Elias had returned to the village to gather more men. They were preparing traps, loading rifles, and making maps. They wouldn't wait much longer. Reed knew what would happen if they found the wolves before he could stop them. There would be gunshots, panic, blood. The baby could be caught in the middle. He couldn't let that happen, so he made a choice. He returned to the crash site, found a patch of fresh snow, and buried his rifle beneath it. Then he whispered something only the trees could hear. "This forest took my trust once, but I'm giving it another chance." That night, Ashen lifted her head and let out a soft, low howl, not of warning but of knowing. Somewhere in the distance, Reed heard it and nodded to himself. He would protect the child, even if it meant standing between wolves and men. The next few days passed like slow-moving clouds. The snow kept falling, and the cold grew sharper. Iron Pine Forest felt heavier, quieter, as if it knew something big was about to happen. Reed Harlan didn't sleep much. Each night, he stayed near the wolves, hidden behind trees or rocks. He kept a safe distance, but he was close enough to see. The baby, still called Leaf in his mind, was growing stronger. He sat up now and looked around with bright eyes. He giggled when the young wolves licked his fingers and smiled when Ashen, the white she-wolf, laid beside him. It was peaceful, but Reed knew it wouldn't last. Back in the village, Elias Ward gathered his hunters. He spoke with fire in his voice. "We gave Reed time. He's failed. The baby's still gone. Now we take action." Mayor Cora tried to stop him. "We don't need guns," she said. "We need patience." "Patience won't save that child," Elias shouted. "Wolves don't raise babies, they eat them." That night, 6 hunters entered the forest with rifles, flashlights, and packs of supplies. Elias led them, his boots crunching loudly over frozen leaves. He was determined to find the wolves and end what he called the madness. Reed saw the lights before he heard the voices. He cursed under his breath. They were close, too close. He grabbed his bag and ran toward the wolves' den, heart pounding. He didn't know what he would do, only that he had to stop a disaster. Ashen sensed it too. The scent of humans was thick in the air. She rose from the nest and stood guard, her body tense. The other wolves circled around Leaf. They weren't angry, they were ready to protect. The baby looked up at them, curious but calm. He didn't know what danger meant. The hunters were nearly there. Reed reached the clearing just in time. He dropped to the ground behind a log and saw the pack standing in a wide circle. In the middle was the child, sitting up, wrapped in fur and leaves. He was safe. He was calm. Then a beam of light hit the clearing. "There!" someone shouted. The wolves turned toward the sound, teeth bared and growls rumbling. Ashen stepped to the front of the circle. Her silver eyes glowed in the flashlight's beam. Her growl was deep, warning. The hunters raised their rifles. "Don't!" Reed shouted, stepping out from his hiding place, arms raised. "Stop right there!" The men froze. Reed stood between them and the wolves. His coat was open, his hands empty. "Reed, move!" Elias barked. "You're in danger," Reed said firmly. "You are. If you shoot, the baby dies." The hunters looked at each other, confused. "What baby?" one asked. "Right there," Reed said, pointing to the center of the wolf circle. "He's alive, and they're protecting him." Flashlights turned toward the center of the clearing, and there he was, Leaf, blinking up at the lights, rubbing his eyes. The hunters gasped. Elias gritted his teeth. "It's a trick." "No, it's not," Reed said, voice shaking but strong. I've been watching them. That white wolf, she took him from the crash. She kept him alive. They all did. The men hesitated. One lowered his gun, then another, but Elias kept his raised. They could turn on him any second. You know how wolves are. I know better now, Reed said. I saw how she treats him, like her own pup. Ashen didn't move. She watched Reed closely, her eyes locked on his. She didn't growl, didn't show her teeth. She just stood there, tall, proud, waiting. Reed took a slow step forward. Please, he whispered, let me take him. The wolves stayed still. Ashen lowered her head slightly, then stepped to the side. The others followed, backing away from the baby but still forming a loose circle. Reed moved slowly, heart pounding. He knelt beside Leaf, scooped him into his arms and wrapped his coat around him. The baby leaned into him without fear. It's okay, Reed whispered. You're safe. Behind him, Elias's gun was still raised. Elias, Reed said quietly, lower it. They could still attack. No, Reed replied, they won't. Not if you don't. A long silence followed. The wind blew softly through the trees. Then Ashen did something that made everyone stop breathing. She sat down, calm, still, watching, not threatening. Elias slowly lowered his rifle. This is madness, he muttered. No, Mayor Cora's voice called from behind them. She had followed the group at a distance and now stood at the edge of the clearing, eyes wide with wonder. It's a miracle. Reed stood, holding the baby close. The hunters stepped back. Not one of them raised their gun again. For a few long minutes, everyone just watched. The wolves, the baby, Reed, Ashen. It was like time had stopped. Then Ashen gave one soft, low howl, a goodbye. She turned, walked into the shadows and disappeared. The rest of the pack followed her, fading into the trees. Reed didn't move until the forest was silent again. When he finally turned around, his face was wet with tears. He's safe, he said. Thanks to them. Mayor Cora nodded slowly. Let's get him home. Reed walked at the front of the group as they made their way back to the village. Leaf slept in his arms, head resting against his chest. The forest around them no longer felt cold or dangerous. It felt like something ancient and alive had opened its heart and then closed it again. Behind them, Elias walked in silence. He didn't say a word, but his shoulders were no longer square. He looked smaller somehow. When they reached the edge of town, villagers came running. Gasps and cheers filled the air. Jonas and Faye were still recovering in the hospital, but when they heard their son was alive, they cried harder than they ever had before. Reed handed the baby to the doctors, then stepped back, watching from a distance. He said nothing. He didn't need to. The village didn't sleep that night. Word spread fast. The baby is alive. He was saved by wolves. People crowded around the hospital, trying to understand what had really happened. Some believed Reed's story. Others thought it sounded too strange to be true. But one thing was clear. The baby, Leaf, was safe, warm, and alive. Inside the hospital room, Jonas and Faye Merrin held their child in their arms. They cried, smiled, and kissed his tiny head over and over. They couldn't believe he had survived in the forest for so many days. The doctors were amazed too. He had a few bruises and a small cut on his cheek, but no broken bones, no frostbite, no signs of hunger. Someone or something had taken good care of him. Reed stood quietly in the hallway, watching through the glass. He didn't go in. He just wanted to make sure Leaf was okay. Mayor Cora Delvin walked up beside him. You did it, she said softly. Reed shook his head. No, Ashen did it. I just brought him home. Cora gave him a small smile. That doesn't make what you did any less important. Outside, a group of hunters stood in silence. Some still didn't believe that wolves had protected the baby. Others were too stunned to speak. Elias Ward leaned against a truck, arms crossed. He had seen it all with his own eyes, but he still couldn't explain it. The world didn't make sense to him anymore. The next morning, Reed returned to the forest alone. He walked past the crash site over frozen streams and deep into the trees. He wasn't there to track or hunt. He came with something else, thanks. When he reached the clearing where the baby had once slept, he stopped. It was empty now. Quiet, peaceful. The snow sparkled under the morning sun. Reed looked around, unsure if anyone or anything was watching. Then, just like before, Ashen stepped out from between the trees. She was calm, strong, and still. Her silver eyes met his. Reed removed his gloves and spoke softly. I don't know if you understand me, but I'm grateful. He lowered his head in a silent bow. Ashen didn't move for a long time. Then she gave a short, soft howl, not loud, not threatening, just a sound that felt like peace. Reed turned and walked away, knowing that part of his heart would always stay in that forest. In the days that followed, strange things began to happen. Other wild animals, foxes, deer, even birds, started acting differently. Less afraid, more balanced. Villagers noticed that fewer livestock were disappearing. The forest seemed calmer. A group of scientists arrived to study the area. They had heard the story about the white she-wolf and the baby. Most of them didn't believe it at first. But after spending a few days in Iron Pine, they saw something odd. Animals acted as if they were being guided, like someone or something was keeping the peace. One scientist, Dr. Lenora Miles, asked to speak with Reed. "You were there," she said. "You saw the wolf." Reed nodded. "Her name is Ashen." Lenora raised an eyebrow. "You named her?" "She earned it." She asked him questions for hours about the pack, their behavior, the way they treated the child. Reed told her everything he could remember. Later, Lenora spoke to Mayor Cora and the village council. "We believe this wolf plays a much bigger role in the forest than anyone realized. She's not just an alpha, she's something more." The villagers gathered in the town hall. Everyone had heard about the wolves. Everyone had questions. Reed stood at the front of the room, nervous but steady. "I used to think wolves were just predators," he said. "Dangerous, wild, something to fear. But I was wrong. That she-wolf saved a child's life. She didn't have to, but she did." Some people nodded, others frowned. Then Faye Merrin stood up, her child in her arms. Her voice was quiet but strong. "My son is alive because of her. That's all I need to know." The room fell silent. Then, slowly, people began to clap. Not loud, not wild, but real. Even some of the hunters, including Elias, lowered their heads in quiet respect. The council voted that night. The wolf hunting licenses would be cancelled. A part of Iron Pine Forest would be named a protected wildlife zone. No guns, no traps, just peace. Reed became the unofficial guardian of that land. People trusted him now, not just because of what he'd done, but because of how he had changed. One cold morning as the village settled into winter, Reed stood at the forest's edge, looking out. A child's laughter rang behind him. Leaf was bundled in a coat, throwing snowballs at his father's boots. Jonas laughed and scooped him up. Reed smiled and turned back to the trees. Somewhere out there, Ashen watched. She didn't come close, but Reed could feel her presence. She was still protecting something. Not just Leaf. All of them. 1 week later, a small wooden sign was placed at the edge of the protected land. It read, "Ashen's Watch," in honor of the wild protector. People began to leave small tokens at the sign. Pine cones, feathers, even simple thank you notes written by children. It became a quiet place, a sacred place. Not for hunting, not for building, just for remembering. And sometimes, if the wind was just right, villagers swore they heard a howl in the distance. Not a warning, a promise. From that day on, Reed walked the forest not as a hunter, but as a friend. The wolves never came too close, but they were never too far. He didn't need to see them to know they were there. And in the heart of Iron Pine, where snow touched the tips of ancient trees, a bond had been made between nature and people, fear and trust, silence and love. A bond that would never break.
Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Love Tales of Tales, for long, heartwarming pets and animals, love stories that stay with you long after they end.